Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name's Tommy, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
Doing all right. We'll try to get through this version of the recording without me smacking the mic this time.
We're already off to a great start. We made it 10 seconds in before you hit the mic last time.
This is better than the first time.
Because I know it's a new record, actually, I think. But anyway, we are here today to talk a little bit about the Packers' upcoming Week 3 matchup against the Titans. Just a bit of a, where are the Packers now? They are currently 1-1, tied for second in the NFC North, although by tiebreakers they're fourth, but who cares? Tied for second in the NFC North. Going into this game, hoping to get another one. But we'll be bringing you all the details, what this Titans matchup entails, what we want to see from the Packers, what we're worried about in this matchup. We'll be talking about all that in this episode. Before we do, though, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear here today, come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. Tweet out whenever we have new episodes, stats that we find when we're doing research for these episodes, Packers injury reports, Packers roster moves, content from other Packers content creators that we like, one-stop shopping for everything Titletown. And then subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We are actually, shout out to cousin Eli, hoping to get back on YouTube with this episode. He helped us out a lot. If you're familiar with the podcast, you'll remember cousin Eli. He's filled in for me before. But yeah, he was able to figure out, hopefully, to get us back on YouTube, and not just this episode, but the back catalog of some of the ones that were missing in the last one. So shout out to him. He's getting producer credits going forward. But yeah, so Dad, hopefully back on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review, or leave a comment. Let us know if you want to talk Packers. We're always excited to talk with other Packers fans. But Dad, let's just get into this episode, though, and let's start with a roster move. Packers, unfortunately, are placing running back Marshawn Lloyd on IR. Stinks for the rookie. He's had a couple of small injuries that kind of just keep derailing him a little bit. Corresponding move is signing running back Chris Brooks to the active roster and wide receiver Cornelius Johnson to the practice squad. Dad, any thoughts on, obviously stinks for Lloyd. What are your thoughts on getting Brooks in? What are your thoughts on, that move as opposed to maybe Ellis Merriweather from the practice squad? What do you think?
Yes, I was a little surprised how quickly they put him on IR. I did not expect the ankle injury to be serious. And so my first thought was, maybe they're just giving him a little time to get over all of his various, bumps and bruises that he's had during the, training camp, preseason, and season so far, because he's had the various leg and.
Yeah, he went from a hip injury to a hamstring injury, now to an ankle injury. And the ankle injury is a bit interesting just because, he spoke with reporters on either Monday or Tuesday. So, usually if a player is injured, they're not usually talking in the locker room to, the beat reporters, but he was, and he didn't seem like he was, thinking he was going to be going on IR. That never really seemed to be something that really even crossed anyone's mind, but, maybe they're just giving him some time. This will give him a bit of a reset because, like you said, he has had kind of 3 smaller injuries back to back to back every time it feels like he's getting going, right?
Yeah, and so his carries were looking good. He had, I think, did a decent amount with the chances he was given in the last game. So we'll be looking forward to when he comes back.
Yeah. And he was getting, he had 6 carries to Emmanuel Wilson's 5 just this past game. I'm going to guess that Wilson will probably absorb most of those carries going forward, and Brooks will be more of a designated number 3. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and that's what I'd expect, too, that Brooks will be kind of the emergency backup, especially in the beginning. Though, some of his tape looks nice. That's all. Andy Herman had posted a few of his plays. He's not a speedster, but he's a big kind of bruising back, and looks like he can break some tackles.
Mm-hmm. But speaking of injuries, maybe we should just move on to the injury report there, because it is a bit of a long one, and we got quite a podcast to go. So let's start diving through this injury report. Dad, we're just going to go through the Thursday participation, players who are listed for the Packers and the Titans. Titans, it's pretty short, so we'll start there. Luke Gifford, their linebacker, did not participate Thursday with a back injury. He wasn't listed Wednesday, so that seems like something that's just popped up. So something to keep an eye on there. And then Jeffrey Simmons and L'Jarius Steed, they both took vet rest days on Wednesday, but they were back full in Thursday, so that's not really anything to look at. And then running back Tyjae Spears, their second running back, has an ankle injury. Didn't practice on Wednesday, but was a limited participant Thursday, so kind of moving in. Seems like he'll probably be available. Titans-wise, doesn't really seem like there's that much there, even if Spears doesn't go, Dad. It's been mostly Pollard so far anyways. 42 snaps for Pollard to 13 so far for Spears so far this year, and then 33 carries to 10. It kind of seems like he's, not a huge role in the offense anyways, even if he were to miss, right?
Yeah, but I'm sure they'd like the depth as well.
Yeah, true. True. Moving on to the Packers side, though, because that's where more names are listed. Just to preface, Matt LaFleur did mention that a lot of players they were going to give, some time off because coming off a game where you ran it 50 times and it was the second hottest day in Lambeau history. And apparently this weekend it's supposed to be 92, 94 degrees in Nashville, so it's going to be another hot one. He said they're kind of trying to, save their energy a little bit. But, Dad, just some players who were listed on Thursday's report. Kenny Clark was limited with a toe. Josh Jacobs was limited with the same back injury he was limited with last week. Elton Jenkins was limited with illness and glute, but he did not participate Wednesday, so at least he's moving forward, I guess. Tucker Kraft limited with a shoulder. He was in a red non-contact jersey, so that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell if he was, though I guess yesterday wasn't padded, so it...
Yeah, it doesn't matter as much for the non-contact. Jordan Morgan, DNP with that shoulder injury he had to leave the game for. He hasn't practiced either Wednesday or Thursday. Josh Myers with an ankle injury, limited both days. Jaden Reed with a calf injury, didn't practice Wednesday, but was back as a limited participant Thursday, so that's good. Zach Tom, limited both days with a quad injury. Carrington Valentine, DNP both days with an ankle injury, so maybe we'll see Eric Stokes at cornerback too if he misses this game. And then Rasheed Walker with a shoulder injury, limited both days. And then, Dad, the main point, we've buried the lead a little bit. Jordan Love is back practicing, and he is, as Matt LaFleur said, all we get to know is he's limited. Have you watched Matt LaFleur's pressers?
I haven't, but I've heard people talk about just how often he'll say, how many times he said the word limited.
Anytime limited. He was asked,
limited?
but was
limited.
He able to participate in team? He'd be like, he was limited. He's like, but in team drills, like, did he participate in those? He was limited. He's like, what was he able to do today? He was limited. It was like, he was like, I'm not giving you anything else. But even to see him limited in these practices, I don't think it necessarily means for sure he's going to play this weekend, but I think it means he's closer than we probably thought he was, right?
Yeah, and the fact that he's practiced 2 days in a row, he didn't have to have a day off after practicing yesterday, I think that means a little something as well.
And they asked
I think
him,
it means the chance of him playing. It's a possibility this week. It's not crazy, and the chance for the next week, I think, is reasonable.
Yeah, and they asked him, they've asked both him and LaFleur, they said, we're going to give it up until 90 minutes before kickoff when they have to make that decision. Like, that's how long they're going to give him to see if he's ready to go. He mentioned
and
that...
Also, to give us any information.
Yeah. He mentioned that, he's played with a brace before when he was at Utah State, when he tore his meniscus in his other knee. He's mentioned that he doesn't feel like he needs to be like all the way mobile to be able to play. He just needs to be able to protect himself. But obviously it's going to come down to medical staff clearing him and the coaching staff making, the decision they think is right, both for this season and for the future, because that's what matters the most. It's just one game this weekend. They already kind of took one with Malik Willis on week 2. So we're going to see, though. We're going to keep an eye on that going forward, because I think that changes, how this game is viewed in a lot of ways. So kind of preface that we don't know who the quarterback is going to be this weekend. So a lot of what we're talking about today
we'll give you a preview anyway.
Yeah, we're going to try and give you a preview of everything else because, it could be fun. Malik Willis getting a bit of a chance at a revenge game, although he was, very complimentary of the Titans organization.
He definitely downplayed the whole revenge thing. He was like, no, I'm just grateful they gave me a shot. People in response to the idea of a revenge game, he was not really having it.
Yeah, no, he seems like just a kind of a sweet guy. But anyway, so it'll be either Malik Willis again or Jordan Love. We won't know until, what is it? 10:30 a.m. Lambeau time. That'll be it. That's when we'll know.
Yeah. So just an hour and a half before kickoff.
And so we'll know when you know. But anyway, check out @FatherSonPacker on Twitter. We'll be keeping you up to date with that. Dad, anything else on the injury report that you want to keep an eye on? Obviously, sucks for Morgan. I think some people were saying it was the same shoulder, which is obviously not ideal. But hopefully he was on a bike apparently. So
a specific report. Yeah, and Valentine, after looking good in the last game, I did not pick up when he got hurt. So, and the fact that he has DNP both days so far,
not a super great sign, yeah, obviously. But at least they have Stokes there, who's also looked solid, I think, so far to start the year. So, at least they have that. But anyway, that's the injury report. Dad, let's move on to the game preview. Game is in Nashville, 1 p.m. local time, noon Green Bay time. Per BetMGM, the Titans are favored by 2 points, over under 37.5 for an implied score of 20-18. Kind of seems like Vegas is thinking it's going to be Malik Willis again, I would imagine.
I would think so. But but I don't know if the line moved at all, when
I heard it moved 3 to 2.5. It moved like a half a point.
First started the practice.
Yeah, it seems like Vegas is like, yeah, he's practicing, but we don't think he's going to play, and that's why the line has stayed there. But Dad, let's kind of get into our first section here, which is keeping up with the Joneses. Just kind of checking in on how the Titans are doing so far this year. What is Tennessee looking like through 2 weeks, Dad?
Yeah, so they're 0-2, and if you go on Twitter for their they're always talk about how this is a must win for them now.
Yep,
but
cornered animal game
really
for sure.
Yeah, they've struggled to protect the ball. Really, they're currently last in giveaways or tied for last in giveaways and last in turnover margin per game, according to TeamRankings.com. That'd be kind of the story. The references to the surrender cobra pose.
Yeah, so they're coming into this year, with a new head coach in Brian Callahan. Kind of changing things up from previously having Mike Vrabel there. They're trying to see essentially what they have in Will Levis. They spent a lot in free agency, bringing in a lot of players like Calvin Ridley, drafting J.C. Latham early in the first round to bring in some offensive line help. Spending money on Tony Pollard in free agency, bringing in some stuff to see how Will Levis looks. And through 2 weeks, I would say up and down. He's struggled at times. He's made some plays. He's mostly just made like 2 or 3 very dumb, very, very dumb plays. And I don't know if you've noticed, but his coach just kind of let him know how dumb he thinks they are.
Publicly let everybody know
what do you think about that? Plays. I feel like it's kind of, it's not like, what's the point?
I was surprised. It's kind of surprising. Right, to hear that spoken out loud to the public.
Yeah, it's like you're just kind of tearing down like a not first year, but like a real first year starting quarterback. Like, what's the point? He knows he's not supposed to do that, because he said something after the first game. He said, "Yeah, we would have won if we punted on 1st and 10 every time." I'm like, okay, like it's not exactly instilling confidence in your quarterback. And then he's like cussing him out on the field on live television, like after that, and obviously. It was a terrible fumble. It was crazy he even thought about doing that. Because you saw the play, right?
He tried to lateral it, right?
He like trips and is falling over his offensive lineman, like jumping over them. And as he's jumping over that player he's tripping over, he tries to fling it backwards. And it's like, you just like, it's like his brain shut off for a second. But yeah, Brian Callahan's really laid into him a lot. And so that's kind of, the mojo going on there.
So no pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but yeah, they're 0-2. They're backed into a corner.
Yeah, though I will say, Ridley looked good the last game. Pollard has looked better than he did last year. In terms of the additions they've had. It was kind of a funny addition though, because I feel like Pollard and Spears are very similar.
Yeah, stylistically, yeah, I agree. They are kind of similar, but maybe that's just they want to be able to run that no matter who they have out there. They want to be able to, be able to threaten the passing game, threaten the running game. And Pollard's look good there. And they got a nice run blocking O-line, especially on the left side with, back-to-back first-round picks with J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski playing at left tackle, left guard. So they can run to that side pretty well. So that's going to be something to watch. But anyway, we're getting into things to keep an eye out for, Dad. But that's pretty much what's going on with the Titans. Let's move on, though, to our next favorite section, which is, hey, now play nice. What is something when you're looking at the Titans roster? We already kind of talked about, they are 0-2. They probably should have won week 1 against the Bears. And they probably should have won week 2 against the Jets. Both those games were kind of close. They mostly gave away that game against the Bears by having a punt block for a touchdown and then throwing a nasty, nasty pick 6. And then the Jets game, they just kind of just let it slip through their fingers. They had it for a second and then, but they've played both teams, which I think are solid enough teams, pretty well. But so, Dad, what are some things that positive that you can say about the Titans that you think is, they do well?
Yeah, so you already mentioned the running backs. And so the rushing game overall is pretty decent. In both rush EPA per play and rush success rate, they're kind of middle of the league, 13th and 17th, and which is better than the Packers at 15th and 26th. So they're up from, even though we feel like the Packers have been kind of running decently so far the year, the Titans are actually doing a better job. Pollard and Spears are both averaging over 4 yards per carry. Pollard a little bit better, like 4, almost 4.5. Pollard is 17th in the league in PFF rushing grade and 14th in elusive rating with an elusive rating of 84. So he's
looked rejuvenated. I mean,
yeah,
he's one extra year away from having.
Yeah,
he broke his leg
injury,
the season before, and it's probably an extra year away from that is probably doing him good.
Yeah, so he seems to have a little bit more juice this year than he did last year.
Yeah, definitely.
Where I think people were expecting a lot out of him, and it maybe just wasn't, quite conducive. Right for enough of that year.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, my thing that that's definitely was on my list of things that I thought that they've looked good. They've looked good running the ball. They brought in, along with Brian Callahan as the head coach, he brought his dad, Bill Callahan, as the offensive line coach, who is like a very well-known, well-respected offensive line coach, been doing it for a long time, and I think that's helped their run game. The thing that I wanted to focus on that I think they have done really well is their interior D-line tandem of Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat, the rookie out of Texas, who's just a mammoth of a man.
Who looked really good at the Senior Bowl.
And looked really good in week one. But they can really impact the run game. Run defense-wise, per NFL Pro, they have the second highest stuff percentage, which is, the percent of runs stopped at or behind the line of scrimmage, despite playing an 8-man box at the 5th lowest rate. So when that's happening, you know that your D-line, your interior D-line, is really occupying players and getting into the backfield, which is, that's something that I am keeping an eye on because our interior is, they played pretty well last game, but they're, I would say, the weaker part of the offensive line. But Dad, so that's playing nice. What are some things, though, speaking of things the Titans do well, what are some things you are nervous about in this game where it's like, okay, that strength matches up tough, with a weakness of the Packers, What are some things going into this game you're maybe a little nervous about?
So a couple things that I'm sort of nervous about it. I don't know how much about the Packers' weakness, but the run after the catch. So per pro.nfl.com, Green Bay is last in the league in yards after catch over expected. And perhaps this is heavily influenced by the A.J. Brown play, since we've only had 2 games so far this year. But I do worry about, say, like Calvin Ridley or even the running backs.
I'm more worried about the backs than I'm more worried about the running backs than the receivers in this one for the Yak, especially Pollard. But yeah, no, I could definitely see him running all over us with screens because honestly, the Packers, haven't been tested too much with screens. Saquon had that wheel route up the sideline, but they didn't do a whole lot of dump offs to him. And then Taylor's not really much of a receiving threat out of the backfield either. So.
No, he had been, but that is something to worry about that they could have taken advantage. I think with Spears or Pollard.
Yeah.
And so that is something that they may have players who can take advantage of that weakness on the Packers, though they haven't, they're not necessarily up near the top of the league themselves in run after the catch, but I think they both have shown the ability in the past.
Yeah. And it's a small sample size for Green Bay, being poor. It's only 2 games, but if you told me the linebackers weren't able to tackle dump offs to running backs, I would believe you. If you told me that you looked in the future and that's a thing, I believe it.
A replay of Quay Walker getting stiff armed, like he did last week by Jonathan Taylor. I would hope to see Walker bringing guys to the ground right away instead of getting. I
don't even know how you get stiff armed that bad when your arms are that long. Like you should still be able to reach.
I think it started with a bad angle. And so he just was not in good position to stop the run in the first place.
And that's unfortunately kind of the story of Quay Walker's career so far, is just kind of not quite being in the right spot a lot of the time.
And then one other thing is that the deep throw. Now, we did do a decent job last week, but Calvin Ridley leads the league in air yards per target at 22.8, just ahead of Alec Pierce per NFL.com. So
yep.
We were worried about that going into last week's game, but Packers did a good job in limiting the deep shots to Pierce generally. And so let's hope they can do it again this week, but it will be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Will Levis has a cannon. Like he can heave that ball.
Get another quarterback with a big arm.
Yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye on. The thing that I'm a little bit nervous about is their run game versus our run defense. You kind of already mentioned it. They have a nice run game, but I just wanted to add some numbers onto it. 10th in yards per carry for the Titans so far this year, 11th in EPA per carry, 11th in success rate, and they haven't really blocked the run that well. They're 26th in yards before contact per attempt, but their running backs have done really well. They're 5th in yards after contact per attempt. So they're not blocking it up great, but their backs are really creating a lot. They have a top 10 run offense by a lot of metrics. And meanwhile, the Packers are allowing the 6th highest yards per carry, the 7th most carries of 10 plus yards, the 4th most rushing yards over expectation per attempt. But the Packers are, actually, just as a little bit of a silver lining, actually have the 3rd highest stuff rate in terms of hitting players in the backfield. But a lot of those numbers, Packers allowing a lot of explosive runs, allowing a high yard per carry, and the fact that the Titans running backs have been able to create so well, it does give me some, cause for trepidation in this matchup, because I think the goal is to make Will Levis beat you. But if he never has to, really do much, then there aren't those because I think the goal is to make him beat you so he makes mistakes so you can take advantage of those mistakes. But if you never get to stopping the run, then you're never going to be able to bear the fruits of, making him make mistakes, which is the main reason the Bears and the Jets won were because Will Levis made mistakes. But if he never has to do anything, they probably win those games. So that's just kind of something I'm a little bit nervous about, is they're just going to be able to run all over us.
At least that's what their coach thinks.
Yeah. But
the coach thinks that
what do you think?
Do anything, they would have won the games.
Are you nervous at all about, them running all over us?
I think we want to get in a situation where they have to pass.
Yeah, definitely.
Where Levis is forced to drop back and pass. That is to our advantage.
But speaking of things that are to our advantage, let's kind of move on to, some more sunshiny items. What are some exploitable weaknesses of the Titans that you're seeing in this matchup, Dad? What are some things? Well, maybe it makes more sense for me to start here, because yours is kind of connected to mine. I was going to start with their offensive line has been allowing a ton of pressure. Now, we mentioned, they haven't blocked the run great, based on, yards before contact per attempt numbers. They also have not protected Will Levis very well. So the goal is to get them to throw because of this, because Will Levis is by far the most pressured quarterback in the league. Now, whether you want to say he's holding the ball too long or you want to say the line isn't protecting well for him, I think it's a little bit of both. But the gap, he's by far the most, because the gap between him and second is as big as the gap between second and ninth. He is blowing everyone out of the water in terms of how often he's getting pressured right now. Specifically, right tackle, I hate to call out individuals, but right tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere has allowed the most pressures of any offensive lineman in the league at 11 in 2 games per PFF. That is a lot. 11 in 2 games is really, really poor. So I'm really looking at Rashawn Gary in this matchup, because I think that's specifically that right tackle matchup is an exploitable spot, and specifically getting them into a drop back passing game, I think, is somewhere where you can really take advantage. And Dad, when you do pressure him, there are even more ways you can take advantage, it sounds like.
Right. So my exploitable weakness is Will Levis has struggled under pressure. His PFF passing grade under pressure is 5th worst in the league at 26.5. Now,
for reference, 60 is average.
60 is average. And his passer rating under pressure is 44.9, which is down from his 80 passer rating when he's not pressured. And this is not just a small sample size from this year, because last year, on the whole season, his PFF grade under pressure was 37.4 with a passer rating of 59.1. And last year, his completion percentage dropped 20% when it was under pressure versus not under pressure. And he finished with the 3rd worst completion percentage last year under pressure at 56.1%. He's also, in contrast to Richardson, who, had a high rate of off-target throws, Levis is less of a threat to run. He's only got 4 scrambles out of his 42 pressures. So he's not running around to run a field so much, so you don't have to worry so much about his escaping. On longer times to throw, so over 2.5 seconds, Levis is 2nd worst in the league per PFF grade. So if he starts running around trying to find somebody to throw to, it, I guess, doesn't go very well.
As evidenced by the 2 plays we've already referenced, where he kind of, I think someone said it was the most Carson Wentz throw by someone not named Carson Wentz they've ever seen.
I heard people use the Carson Wentz comparison as well. So you want him to be improvising. It's not, I think.
Yeah. He's a young quarterback who's shown he's a bit mistake prone right now. And I think you got to make him uncomfortable so he feels the need to make, decision making in tough spots. And he's shown he's, kind of giving the ball away in those spots.
Right. So overall, his adjusted EPA per play and success rate are not good. 26th in the league by our RBSDM. And per pro.nfl.com, his EPA per dropback is 30th in the league. His completion percentage over expected is actually decent at 9th, but it's the big mistakes, I think, that are dragging down his EPA per play.
Yeah. Big, and not just big mistakes, big, game swinging mistakes, as we've already mentioned.
So you need to get him under pressure, force him to go off script, and try to make a quick decision.
Well, that kind of ties into the next section, Dad, which is I hope the Packers blank. And it kind of ties into mine because let's move on here. I hope the Packers can actually get pressure in this game, Dad. Because while the Packers currently rank 16th in pressure rate in the NFL per NFL Pro, they're ranked 28th in time to pressure. So they're only getting an average amount of pressure, and the pressure they are getting is not very impactful. It's not fast pressure. They're letting players hold the ball. And the question is whether or not that was because in 2 weeks, they played two very mobile quarterbacks who you want to contain. Both the coaching staff and players have said, yeah, the game plan was to contain. Or is it because the D-line has some problems along it and players aren't playing up to, their talent? And so I think this game is going to be a bit of a benchmark game because if you can't get pressure against the Titans, that's alarm bells, I think. That's serious alarm bells, don't you think?
Yes, because I think there are reasons why they should be able to just go ahead and try to get pressure as well. So I've heard very few say like it was more of like kind of a mush rush where they're just trying to collapse the pocket, not really shoot the gaps or commit too much to either side of the blockers to avoid giving up a run lane. But what I'd like to see is the Packers rushing with 4. I think to limit openings downfield because I think you get pressure on him without there being openings, I think he'll make mistakes. But I think they can penetrate the gaps more and go upfield in this game against Levis more aggressively than they did the last 2 games against the Eagles and the Colts.
Yeah, and
he's less of a risk. He can run a little bit, but apparently he's not looking too much.
He can run a little bit, but there's a difference between he can run a little bit and he's one of the better running quarterbacks in the league, which is what they've gone against in weeks 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And they've talked about, having rush lane integrity. I think, like you said, this game, the front 4 can be a lot more aggressive in trying to penetrate gaps and get upfield and just try and create more negative plays. Because I think through 2 weeks, they have not created as many, tackles for loss, sacks as we would have hoped coming into this season, right?
But they are getting turnovers.
They are getting turnovers.
Forcing some picks.
Yeah, that's true. They have 5 picks when they had 7 all of last year.
Either good plays by the coverage or forcing bad throws with pressure.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the 5 picks, one of them I'm taking immediately off the board. It's an end-of-game Hail Mary. Fair enough.
That's no different in the play than if it had been knocked to the ground. They both had the same result.
And then I think one of them is a really great play from Xavier McKinney, the very first one, where he comes across the field and ranges across versus the Eagles.
He just reads it, yeah.
You look at the other ones, though, kind of gifts. And the fact is, you still need to capitalize on those gifts, which is something they didn't do last week. But the first one from Richardson, the second one from Richardson, he's just kind of throwing it straight to a Packers player. The Jair one, I have no idea what Jalen Hurts thought he saw on that play. Jair does a good job of reading it and coming off of his man.
He reads it ahead of time and ranges
late
over.
Across your body, over the middle, you're just asking to get picked off. So I think some of them have been kind of gifts, and I think that you might see a regression to the mean there in terms of not having as many he's just throwing it right to our guys. But at the same time, last year, whenever they threw it right to our guys, we didn't catch it. So that's at least, something there. They're at least making, some progress on that front. They're actually capitalizing on turnover-worthy plays. Moving on to the next section. Actually, I did have one more thing that I wanted to hope the Packers would do in this one. And that was, I hope the Packers try more of a rotation at linebacker. We talked about previously, but after having a decent level of impact in week 1 on limited snaps, and the coaching staff saying they wanted to get him out there more, Edgerrin Cooper, got fewer snaps in week 2 than he did in week 1. And so I'd like to see him play more. And also, Eric Wilson was excellent last week on limited snaps. He pretty much killed 2 drives in the second half by himself. He had that 1 interception, which was awesome. And then he had the 1 play on the option where he was going out and he stopped both Richardson and Trey Sermon on the play until he got help coming from the edge. And so I would like to see some more rotation in of both Cooper and of Eric Wilson. The only issue, though, Dad, is the player who's playing the worst in the linebacker spot is the guy who's first on the depth chart. So what are your thoughts on maybe, expanding that linebacker rotation? Because I don't know who you take off the field. What do you do in this situation?
Yeah, it's tough because I don't think the Packers are going to have the appetite to take Walker off the field when he's, wearing the green dot and is the guy who's playing every snap on defense every game. So it would be nice to see what Cooper could do when given that opportunity.
Yeah, and so it's like because I feel like McDuffie plays the run really well. Wilson has shown that he like can be a playmaker. He was so good last week. You're not going to give him fewer snaps. It's like whose snaps are you taking away to get Cooper on the field more? It's a tough problem, but I think you have to play Cooper more because the ceiling of the defense is so much higher if he's the player they all want him to be with that second round pick.
I agree. And another thing I just throw in here, off script, off the notes, is similar question about the safety rotation and getting Williams in the game more. And are we going to start seeing somebody else in the slot?
Yeah, because last game when they started playing Williams a little bit more, it was pretty much just like they took Bullard off the field and put Williams in. And I don't love taking Bullard off the field. He's playing really good right now. But I also want to see Williams on the field. And so it's like, okay, can we see either some 3 safety looks, which, could be fun, maybe bringing McKinney down into the box, maybe bringing Bullard down into the box, or does it make sense to, take Keyshawn off the field for a couple of snaps, maybe 10 snaps a game, and play Bullard there and play Williams deep? I mean, I think Keyshawn's look pretty good. Aaron Schatz of FTN, he's the DVOA guy, was saying that he was one of his like 5 or 6 best corners in the league based on DVOA so far. So there's at least that. But yeah, so I'm not really sure how, because it's a good problem to have in some ways with these rookies because right now they're trying to rotate in their first round pick who's injured. But besides that, they're trying to rotate him in, but he hasn't like won that competition. He probably would have if he was healthy during the offseason, but that doesn't really matter now. They're trying to rotate in their first round pick. They're trying to rotate in their second pick, who, limited snaps. He's only getting like 7 to 10 snaps a game, and maybe would have if he wasn't injured in the offseason, but we don't know that now. Bullard is playing as a full-time player. That's good. Tyron Hopper's not playing at all. Marshawn Lloyd is injured on IR, but even before that, he was just a rotational third running back. And then Evan Williams is rotating in like 8 snaps a game. They're not getting really anything out of this rookie class right now.
No, but you could say that they had a lot of depth already, but we were hoping for more from the first couple of picks, like the first round pick and the first of their second round picks.
Yeah,
we were hoping that basically Bullard and Cooper would both be playing about the same amount.
Yeah, but and right now it's like I don't know what you do, like, because Walker's playing the worst of the linebackers, but he's ahead of those other guys. And
yeah, I think part of it is Wilson's been playing a lot better than we expected.
Yeah, which is a good problem to have. Part of it. So because I think everyone was like, oh, he'll just take Wilson's spot, and Wilson will be like your special team guy. But Wilson's playing great right now, so it's not like none of the really rookies besides Bullard are really contributing. But it's in some ways less about how the rookies are playing and more about injuries and how the players ahead of them are playing. Because I think Sean Ryan's playing way better than we thought he was going to. I think that, we talked about Eric Wilson playing way better than we thought he was going to. We talked about, Emmanuel Wilson having a really nice camp and looking good. And then Marshawn Lloyd also having injuries. A lot of it is just injuries and the players ahead of them playing better, huh?
Yeah, I think injuries have set three of their top
5 picks back.
5 picks back.
Yeah. But anyway, so those are the things we hope the Packers do. But Dad, let's move on to our next section, which is don't take your eye off that guy, which is a player who we think the Packers, for the Packers to win, needs to play well.
Yeah, for me, the one I'll be looking at is Rashawn Gary.
Yep.
He's been going against the weakest link most of the time, against the weakest link of their offensive line. Guy who's struggled to pass protect in the first 2 games of the season.
That's an understatement. And he has been probably the worst pass protecting right tackle in the league so far through 2 weeks.
So I'm hoping that, that continues this week, and that I want to see a huge breakout game for Gary. And like we've had before, where it's like three sacks.
Take over the game.
In the back, just take over the game. Just wreck it. Forced fumble, couple sacks.
Yeah, let's do it, because I think this is a game he can take over. Like you said, the matchup is favorable. He should be having a lot of nice one-on-one matchups with that right tackle. I think it's also up to the defensive staff to, get him those one-on-one matchups. But just pin your ears back and go, because, if they can make Levis make mistakes, I think he's numero uno on you're going to be the guy to, get that pressure if anyone is, because you have the easiest opponent, and you're also probably the best pass rusher on the D-line.
Yeah, so I'm really hoping to see just a total breakout game where he's just one of those games every time it was just blew up their whole their offense couldn't function because he was in the backfield so many times.
Yeah. I am cheating. I have 3 players here. Usually 2 is pushing
You
it.
usually give me a hard time about this.
And usually 2 is pushing it.
Right.
3 is a lot. I
don't know. I don't know if I can give you any slack for this.
I have Quay Walker.
I may have to go look up somebody more.
I have Quay Walker because we talked about he was really poor last game. Really, really poor. Probably the weakest spot on defense of, any of the starters. And I'd like to see him have a bounce back game, and he needs to based on how much Tennessee likes running the football and likes throwing to their backs. Second player is Kenny Clark. He's had a tough 2 weeks, a very quiet 2 weeks for Kenny. Really struggled in that Philly game, was just getting beat up on double teams all day long, and then didn't have a massive impact against Indy either. And then the last player is Josh Myers. It's a tough matchup against Simmons this week and Sweat. And so, him and Ryan and Elton, Elton I'm not as worried about, but him and Ryan have another tough matchup, where they're kind of outmatched, I would say, in terms of, skill-wise. I think Simmons is a better player than either of them, but they're going to have to hold their own. So those are my 3 players to watch who I think are all going to have a good game for the Packers to, come out with a win. But yeah, so those are my players to match. Any thoughts on any of those, Dad? Were you thinking about any of them?
Well, at least it's good that Elton's been playing really well on the interior.
Yeah, and good that he's back. He didn't practice on Wednesday with a glute/illness, but he was a limited participant on Thursday.
Up 3 times on Sunday or something. It's like, just have that guy on fluids, IVs the last few days.
Exactly.
Make sure everybody gets their electrolytes before the game. It's going to be even hotter this week.
Yeah, and if Malik's playing, you're going to be running 50 times again. So hopefully everyone has the Gatorade this week.
Yeah, keep an eye on Josh Jacobs. He looked good last week.
Can he do it again?
I would say, so if I'm going to throw another player out there, since you got 3, I need to get at least a second one. Say Josh Jacobs. He looked good. Jump cuts, even when he was being met at the line, he was finding space to run.
He looks so good if he can just stop fumbling. 2 fumbles in 2 games is tough. Just stop fumbling. Just that's fine. Everything else has been awesome. He's looked great. He's looked so much better than he did last year. Wouldn't you say through 2 games?
Yes. Yeah. Last year looked really really hard.
Yeah.
But this year he's getting more than is there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, way more than is there. Because I would say hands up, I was not a fan of the Josh Jacobs signing. I was usually when these running backs start to show signs of decline, believe them. It's very rare for a player like a running back to have a dip year and then come back up. But so far, through 2 weeks, he's looked so much better than he did last year for the Raiders. And that's a good call out for a player who has to have a big game, especially if it's going to be Malik again. But Dad, let's move on to overtime. Any things that you have not gotten a chance to talk about yet for this matchup, didn't fit any of our nice little boxes that you want to touch on here?
Yeah, so we've already talked about their run defense and how we're worried about it, but their actual run defense grades are kind of all over the place. They're currently 26th in the league per RBSDM in rushing success rate, I guess, and second to last after 2 weeks in team rush defense grade per PFF. But for ProNFL.com, you said they got the second best stuff percentage. So it's in some ways they look good, in some ways they look terrible.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add a couple of things. Like you said, the numbers are kind of all over the place. They are 10th in yards per carry allowed and 10th in yards per game allowed, so top 10 in both of those. At the same time, though, they're 27th in rushing yards over expectation, which is rushing yards over expectation per attempt, rather, which is a next-gen stat. So it is kind of a little all over the place, and so we're going to see, what that amounts to on Sunday.
Right, and people talk about how the Colts are a bad run defense, and a lot of these metrics, Tennessee is significantly worse than the Colts.
Yeah. But Dad, let's move on. Final thing, the bottom line.
Well, you still have your own
I
time.
do. You're right. My own things. The other thing we did not get a chance to touch on, the Titans receivers. They've kind of revamped their receiving core over the last few years, bringing in DeAndre Hopkins last year, bringing in Calvin Ridley for a massive contract this year. Calvin Ridley so far is pretty much their clear number 1, over 6 targets a game. He's 12th in the league in yards per reception. And like you mentioned, he's leading the league in air yards. DeAndre Hopkins, though, doesn't really look like himself. He got injured in the preseason. He's played less than 50% of snaps in both games, only 3 targets over 2 games. So maybe now that I've said that, he's going to have a massive breakout game. But Dad, any thoughts on the Titans, receiving core and how you think the Packers match up there?
Yeah, it's a little, and they've also, I think, it did really score a rushing touchdown last week as well. so they're willing to hand him the ball.
Yeah.
And so that's something we have to keep an eye on.
Did you see the catch that he did make, though? The one down the sideline versus the Jets?
No, I don't think I saw that one.
It's like two guys draped all over him, and it kind of somehow falls between them into his hands as he's sliding into the end zone. And the Jets players have no idea where the ball is. They're just like looking around, and he's like celebrating in the back of the end zone, like running around.
Oh, yes. I remember seeing that highlight now. Because the safety, somebody comes cutting across.
Yeah, and the corner and the safety are like looking like
it.
Yeah, it's like they're like looking at each other like, did you catch that? I didn't catch that. Did you catch that? And then they both look over to Ridley, who's doing a dance in the end zone.
I did see that play because I remember when I first saw that highlight, I thought it was a pick. It's like, oh, that's a pick. He just slid right in front of me, grabbed it. It's like, no, how did that
get there? Yeah, it's like, how did that even make it through there? It's phased through his body. But yeah, so that's the other thing I wanted to touch on is, that Titans receiving core is revamped. It hasn't had a huge impact yet, and obviously not having a full strength version of Hopkins is a little bit tough, but that's just something I'm looking at there. But Dad, final piece, bottom line, the Titans win if blank.
Basically, if the Packers can't run the ball consistently. I think if they can't run the ball consistently, it's going to really set them back. I mean, it sets them back normally.
But with either, Malik Willis or a not full strength Jordan Love, it would set them back even more. You're right.
How about you?
Well, for me, I said the Titans win if they can win first and second down and make the Packers drop back in obvious passing situations. Whether it's Love, at like a limited capacity, or Malik Willis. Malik Willis last week didn't have to, drop back that much on 3rd and 8. Like they had to do it a few times, but if they can get the Packers into those situations, I think that's a recipe for success for the Titans. All right, Dad, Packers win if blank.
Well, mine's kind of like the flip of that. It's like if they force Levis into frequent 3rd and longs, so they could limit the success on early downs and put him into, must-pass situations.
Yep. I mean, forcing 3rd and longs is always kind of it's like an easy answer, but it feels especially true with these two, if it's going to be Malik Willis and Will Levis. Like, it feels doubly true. I got the Packers win if they can pressure Levis into mistakes. I think a lot of this just relies on the Packers defense in this game. I think this is going to be a big game for the defense if they want to win this game. They need the defense to show up.
Yeah, I agree. And I've been feeling like the Packers defense is, got some positives.
There's some positives. I mean, there's some negatives. This is going to be like I mentioned earlier, I think the biggest takeaway from this game is going to be, what does the pass rush look like? If they can't rush the passers versus the Titans, that's going to set off some alarm bells for me. But if they can, I think that could be a recipe for, a victory. If they can just, consistently disrupt, Levis as he tries to drop back.
Oh, I agree. If they don't get pressure in this game, it says something about the whole season coming up.
Yeah, exactly. It says something about the plan on defense but let's not catastrophize too much. Let's at least wait and see what happens. But anyway, Dad, as we wrap up here, final thoughts, score prediction, what do you got? And to be honest here, I have no idea how to predict the score because we don't even know who's playing quarterback for the Packers.
So I'm going for another low scoring game.
Is your score prediction as though Malik Willis is starting? You can preface it. You can preface it. Okay.
Yeah. I think this would be as if Malik Willis is starting. And so I have Green Bay winning 17-10.
Okay.
Because I don't honestly think that the Titans are very good.
Yeah, I mean they're 0-2.
They're a little better than the Colts, but the Colts aren't very good.
Are they that much? Are they better than the Colts? I don't know. We're gonna see. I think their defense is better, but the run game is probably worse. And I think Richardson's a little bit better than Levis. For me, I got Tennessee.
But yeah, I mean, as bad as Levis is, and he's like bottom 6 or 7 in like on target throw percentage.
Yeah,
Richardson's dead last.
Yeah, but Richardson has the ability to run more. He's a more dynamic playmaker. He's better at sack avoidance because of his size. And his brain didn't completely his turnovers were because he was inaccurate, not because his brain just turned off for a whole second and a half. For me, I got Tennessee 20, Green Bay 14. Predicting another loss. I predicted it last week and I was wrong. Hope to be wrong again. But my thought was just I'm assuming it's going to be Malik Willis. We saw in the first half the Packers move the ball like crazy, and then at halftime the Colts adjusted and the Packers could barely move the ball at all. I'm just thinking how much of that is okay, we pulled out all the tricks we had in that game to steal a win, but we don't have anything left. We ran out of tricks at halftime in the last game. So it's like,
or maybe the fact that all the linemen were throwing up.
I mean, that's possible, but it's going to be just as hot this weekend too. So if
you're better prepared for it this time,
I don't know. But my just thought is like, hey, they're going to have a whole week of watching all of the BS that you pulled out with Willis last week, which like tip of the hat, like you pulled that off. But I just think like with a week of analyzing it, it's not going to catch any teams by surprise this week.
No, and it shouldn't have caught the Colts by surprise. But
I think that all the motion and like single wing and like nonsense they pulled out, like
they did run it in a lot of different ways.
And a lot of weird ways that are like college offense ways that's like, okay, we've never even seen this before. And they're running like quarterback draws, like obviously you probably should be prepared for that, but at the same time, if it's not on tape anywhere, like you're just be prepared for the concept of a quarterback draw. It's like we don't know what that looks like when Green Bay runs it, and now the Titans will. So, and the Titans have a much better defense than the Colts. No matter what you think about the Titans, some of those advanced numbers, I think just the Titans defense better than the Colts. So, but anyway, so that's why I'm picking a Titans win. Hope I'm wrong. I just think, they stole one. I think it's going to be hard to steal two. I think it's going to be Malik Willis, and I will keep an eye on that. But Dad, any last things that you wanted to add before we sign off here?
I guess just Packers be ready and have maybe some celebratory after the game, Nashville barbecue or something.
Nashville hot chicken if you're in
Nashville hot chicken. Yep.
But anyway, thank you so much for listening. Once again, check us out on Twitter @FatherSonPacker for new episodes, stats, Packers news, injury reports, roster moves. One-stop shop and everything Titletown. Shout out to Cousin Eli again for helping us figure out the YouTube. We're hoping to get that back up and running. Additional production credits to Eli Evans. But anyway, thank you again so much for listening. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.